Number 1, you should look at it and see that each of the 3 terms can be divided by 5. So your first move, always simplify it. Divide out the greatest common factor. So if we divide each of them by 5, that's going to change it to be 5 multiplied by 5 divided by 5 is 1, so that's just going to be 1m squared. 10 divided by 5 is 2, so that's going to be 2m. Negative 15 divided by 5, that's a negative 3. Now let's factor this down. So what's going to times give you negative 3, add and give you 2. M and m will give you m squared. And the only thing that's going to times give you 3 is a 3 and a 1. But the 3's got to be positive and the 1's got to be negative. Because 3 times negative 1 is negative 3, but 3 plus negative 1 is 2. So, there we go, that's the answer. Number 2. It starts with the 1s, so that's nice. They got nothing in common. What times this gives you negative 50, but adds and gives you 5. It's going to be a and a. It's going to be a negative 5 and a positive 10. Because negative 5 times 10 is negative 50, but 10 minus 5 is 5. Okay, number 3. 3, 11, and 10, they got nothing in common. So, and this does not start with the 1. It starts with the 3. So that's the hint to me that I'm going to break it down into 4 terms. 3n squared plus blank plus 10. So you copy and paste the first and the last. And instead of 3 terms, I'm going to break 11n into 2 pieces. So I'm going to times my 3 to the 10. 30 is my number. So I am looking for something that multiplies and gives me 30, but adds and gives me 11. This is going to be 6 and 5. 6 times 5 is 30. 6 plus 5 is 11. So I'm going to go 6n here and the 5n there. Okay, now I'm just going to group them. So I'm going to group these two together. 3n squared and 6n, I'm going to divide them both by 2n. So it's going to be 2n times, not 2n, because 3 cannot be divided by 2. So I'm going to divide them both by 3n. That's my number. Divide them both by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. N squared divided by n is just n. 6n divided by 3n is 2n. Or no, it's just 2. Because your n's cancel. N divided by n is just 1. So there we go. That's my first group. Okay, the second group, I'm going to divide them both by 5. So it's going to be 5 times 5 divided by 5 is 1. And there's an n. 10 divided by 5 is 2. Okay, now look, in both groups, this n plus 2 shows up. So my final answer in one of the groups is going to be that n plus 2, and the other group is going to be what you divided by 3n and a plus 5. So that is my answer, and you can check it. You can always work forward and check your answer. If you distribute through and add up your like terms, you should get 3n squared plus 11n plus 10. Okay, number 4. This is going to be the same as 3. 5, 3, and negative, they got nothing in common. So, 5p squared plus blank minus 2. You need to change it as 4 terms instead of 3 terms. So times the first to the last, 5 times negative 2, negative 10 is your number. So, it's got to times and give you negative 10, it's got to add and give you 3. And I can do that with a 5 and a 2. The 2 is negative, the 5 is positive. 5 times negative 2 is negative 10. 5 plus negative 2 is 3. So I'm going to go 5p minus 2p. And if I group the first two, I'm going to divide them both by 5p. So it's going to be 5p times 1p plus 1. The next group, since in my parentheses everything is positive, I'm going to divide these both by negative 2. If I divide by negative 2, negative 2p divided by negative 2, that's positive 1p. And a negative 2 divided by negative 2 is positive 1. And now I match up. P plus 1, P plus 1. So my final answer, one of the groups is going to be P plus 1. The other group is going to be what you divide it by. 5p minus 2. and that is it. Number 5. Okay, number 5, what should grab you by number 5 is that it starts with a perfect square and it ends with a perfect square. So you need to be looking for squares. When you see these squares, you got to realize it's a special case. If it's a special case, it's actually pretty easy. So how they multiply and get the 16x squared is they do 4x times 4x. So you can just take the square root. How they multiply and get the 25 is they do 5 times 5. So you kind of ignore the middle until right now. We need to know what kind of signs go here. It's either positive, positive, negative, negative, or you got one of each. And because your middle is a negative 40, it's going to be negative, negative. And here's how they get that negative 40. 4x times 4x, that's 16x squared. 4x times a minus 5, that's a negative 20x. Negative 5 times 4x, that's another negative 20x. Negative 5 times negative 5, that's a positive 25. And so your negative 20 and your negative 20 is going to give you a negative 40x. So if your middle is negative, then they're both going to end up being negative. But you can write it as 4x minus 5 squared. Okay, you see number 6. Hopefully you see that 9 is a perfect square and 25 is a perfect square. So you don't worry about the middle, it's just the first and the last. So if the first is a perfect square and the last, that's a special case. So how they get the 9b squared is they do 3b times 3b. How they get the 25 is 5 times 5. And because my middle is a positive, it's going to be plus and plus. And you can check it real quick. 3b times 3b, that's 9b squared. 3b times 5, that's 15b. 5 times 3b, that's another 15b. So that's how they got the 30b. A 15b and a 15b is a 30b. And then 5 times 5 is 25. So special cases are actually pretty easy. You just got to recognize the squares. Number 7, that's a perfect square, that's a perfect square. So it's going to be easy. They get the 4v squared from a 2v times a 2v. They get the 9 from a 3 times a 3. The middle is a positive, so it's got to be plus plus. Or you can just write 2v plus 3 squared. Okay, 8 is a little different than 5, 6, and 7. 8 does not have a middle term. But it starts with a perfect square, ends with a perfect square. So 16x squared they get from 4x times 4x. The 9 they get from a 3 times a 3, but it's a negative 9. So one of them's got to be plus, one of them's got to be minus. Because negative times positive is negative. Now here's why they have no middle terms. 4x times 4x. 16x squared. 4x times a plus 3 is a plus 12x. Negative 3 times 4x is a minus 12x. And a plus 12x and a minus 12x, that's 0. And a negative 3 times 3 is negative 9. So if they don't have a middle term, one of them's a plus and one of them's a minus. Because when you add up your like terms, they equal 0. So these 4 were all perfect squares. Now you're asked to create your own perfect square. So what number would make this a perfect square? So you gotta look at the middle. And remember, they got a negative 8 because it was it was a negative 4 plus a negative 4. A negative 4a and a negative 4a, that gives me a negative 8a. But the last they get by timesing them. So a negative 4 times a negative 4, that's going to be a positive 16. So it's got to be C. And if you factor it, it's going to look like this, a minus 4 squared. Get 10, you look at the middle number, you cut it in half. 7, if you try and cut 7 in half, it's going to be like 3.5. So you just leave it as a fraction. So I took the 8, I cut it in half. Negative 8 divided by 2 is a negative 4. And then you times that number by itself. Negative 4 times negative 4 is 16. So I cut it in half. Now I times that number by itself. Square it. So 7 halves times 7 halves times your tops. That's 49 times your bottoms. 2 times 2 is 4. So you're looking for B. 49 fourths. Okay, now x plus 2 squared minus 1. If you look at that graph real quick, so this 2 It's really not a plus 2. It is a negative 2. So that is my H, and that is my horizontal translation. So I'm going to go left 2 and down 1. Okay, there's my vertex right there. Left 2, down 1. And then my slope's kind of 1, up 1, over 1. So it's going to look something like this. Now, you need to translate it 3 units to the right and 3 units down. So if I go 3 units to the right, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, and then 3 units down. 1, 2, 3. So my new graph should be somewhere like right here. So how do I get to this new position? 3 units right and 3 units down. Okay, so here's what I've got. I got x minus a minus 2. 3 units to the right, that is a plus 3. And then I got a minus 1, but now I'm going to go 3 units down, that's a minus 3. So I'm going to add these guys together. 2 to the left and 3 to the right should end you up at x minus 1 squared. Down 1 and down 3 should be a total of down 4. So this is your answer. 12. Okay, take this one. So if I draw a graph real quick. So this is 3, it's positive 3, so I'm going to go 3 to the right, down 1, and then my slope is just a 1, up 1, over 1. So it looks like this. Okay, now you need to dilate it by a factor of 2. So what that means is your slope is now going to be 2. So it's going to be y equals 2. So instead of going up 1 over 1, I'm going to go up 2 over 1. So it's going to make it a little steeper. Then you need to flip it over the x-axis. So instead of opening up, now it's going to open down. It's going to look like this. And that means that's got to be negative. The negative is what flips it over the x-axis. Okay, we need to go 2 units to the left. So this dot, I've got to go back here 2 units to the left and then 1 unit down. So right here. So 2 units to the left. Here's what we got. I've got x minus, and it was 3 units to the right. 2 units to the left is going to be negative 2. And then I went down 1, and I'm going to go 1 more down. So I'm going to combine these guys. 3 to the right and 2 to the left. My final answer is negative 2 x minus 1 squared minus 2. So minus 1 and minus 1 is minus 2. This is it. That is your final answer. 13. Okay, 13 is easy. 14 is hard. Vertex. Vertex is this dot right here. So that's a negative 1, negative 2. That's how I get to that dot. Axis of symmetry is the line that cuts your parabola in half. It goes through the x-axis, so it needs to be x equals negative 1. The y-intercept is right here, to where it crosses the y-axis. Y-intercept is a negative 1. And does this have a max or a min? This has a min, because the minimum has a lowest point. The highest point would be infinity. So if you're looking at a graph, it's pretty easy. If you're looking at an equation, this equation is in standard form. Standard form is y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. So you need to identify a, which is how many squares you got. So a is negative 2. B is how many x's you got. That's 8. C is how many 1s you've got. I just got 1. So there's ABC. Okay, first is probably, well, the y-intercept is easy. The y-intercept is C. So the y-intercept is 1. And since it's a negative, I know it's going to look like this, which means it is going to have a max. Okay, now you got to find your line of symmetry. Line of symmetry is going to be negative b over 2a, so it's going to be a negative 8 over 2 times a negative 2. So it's going to be negative 8 over negative 4, which is going to be 2. So x is going to go through at 2. Okay, your vertex is halfway there. You know it's got to go through 2. So if you're looking at your graph, 1, 2, There's your line of symmetry. The vertex has to be at 2. I just don't know how far up or down. So now to find the y, you need to take the 2 and plug it in for these x's. Once there and once there. And if you plug 2 in for those x's and do the math, it will give you the y. So let's do the math. If you plug 2 in, it's going to be negative 2 times whatever you plug in squared plus 8 times whatever you plug in plus 1. So exponents first. 2 squared is 4. 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. 8 times 2 is 16 plus 1. Negative 8 plus 16 is 8 plus 1 is 9. So there's your vertex. Over 2, up 9. Alright, 15. So, you got a graph on the calculator. Type this in, y equals negative 0.35x squared plus 35. Type in b, and type in c. Which one will go the farthest? So you should be looking at this picture. Okay, I can't remember which one is which. Negative 0.35. This guy is A. Who is the negative 0.21? That is B. So this one is C. So the sprinkler's right here. Which one is going to go the farthest? It's going to spray this black one. Is going to go the farthest. It's going to go back and forth, shoot water. So C is going to go the farthest. Which one is going to go the highest? That's going to be the blue one. It's going to shoot water highest. So that's A. And then which one is going to be the narrowest path? That's going to be this red one, which is B. It's not going to shoot it. So pretend the sprinkler just goes back and forth and back and forth. There we go. Okay, 16. A football is kicked from the ground at an initial velocity of 90 feet per second. So here's the equation. H is height in feet, T is time in seconds. So after 1 second, probably the easiest thing to do is just plug 1 in for the seconds. So 1 squared is 1, so it's negative 16 plus 90, which is that 74? I think it's 74. If you plug 1 in to do the math, it's going to give you a 74. So that's probably the quickest way. You plug in the seconds and it will spit out the height. So if I plug in 1, it's going to be 74 feet. But if you look at the graph, you need to plug in the graph. And this is what you're looking at, this one right here. So that's 79, that's 78, 76, 75, 74 is right here. But see, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds. So at 1 second, where does the graph cross at 1 second? It crosses, I don't know, it's hard to see. There, or there, or there. It really crosses 74 if you zoom in, but if you put 73 or 75, that's fine. We'll give you credit for that. The next one, how high or when does it hit 126? So if you're looking at the graph, this is 126.9, so this is 126, and then this is 125. So 126, it crosses once there and once there. That's 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. So that looks like my answer could be like 2.5 seconds and going up, and then it's going to turn around and start falling back down. So it crosses it twice. Anywhere close to 2.5 and 3, if you put that, you'll get full credit. Okay, when is the height 0? So it should be 0 twice. It should be 0 when he kicks it, and it should be 0 when it goes up and then back down and hits the ground right there. So it is 0 at 0, and then again at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe like 5.75 seconds. So it takes almost 6 seconds for it to go up and come back down and hit the ground. What's the context? That's when the ball hits the ground. So that's where it is when you kick it, and then that's when it hits the ground after it comes from the sky. Okay, number 17. If you gotta solve it by graphing, you just punch this into the calculator, except for you gotta change these to x's. So if you type that in and push enter, you just look at the picture and you're looking for this guy right here. You can see where it crosses a 0. So this is a picture. There's 1, there's 2, 0's right here. So it's gonna cross once there and once there. So your answers are -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, and 1. So those are the 2 times where it's going to cross, give you 0, 18. If you change those to x, let's type that in. Now you got to look at where it crosses at -5. So -1, -2, -3, -4, -5. So anywhere on this line, and it should be once right there and once right there. So a 1 will give you -5, and 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, a 7 will give you a -5. So these are your 2 answers. Okay, number 19, now you're just looking at the graph. Okay, the equation. This is going to be pretty easy since you know the vertex. You can use this model right here. Use vertex form. Y equals A x minus h squared plus k. So if you go left 5 and up 2, you need to tell me to go left 5 and up 2. So that's going to be x minus left 5 up 2. So you need to simplify that to x plus 5 squared plus 2. Now all you're missing is the a, and the a is just kind of like your slope, which is down 1 over 1. So it's just 1. But because it's opening down, it's got to be negative. So there is your function right there. Okay, number 20. If you're looking for the zeros, if you're looking for where it crosses, it's going to cross once here, once here. So your zeros are -2 and 3. Okay, number 21, there's probably a few right answers. If it's going to open downward, that's this guy right here. That has to be negative. It doesn't really matter which negative it is. It could be that one, or that one, but it's got to be negative. So I could put in a -2 there. And if it's got a y-intercept of 3, that's the c, because this is really ax squared plus bx plus c. Y-intercept of 3, 3 has to go here, and then it doesn't matter, you can put anything you want here. It can be 0, 1, any of them, that doesn't matter. So the only thing that matters, that guy's got to be negative, that guy's got to be 3. Okay, so 22, you can go through each of them, graph them in your calculator, and see which one, a minimum in quadrant 4. Quadrant 4 is this one right here. And if it's going to have a minimum, it needs to open up. So it has to look something like that. A will work, because if you go 4 to the right and down 2, then it opens up, so A works. B does not, because that goes 4 to the left, down 2. B will end up down here somewhere. C will not, because that goes 4 to the right and up 2. D will not, that goes 4 to the left and up 2. E will, because that's going to go over 1 and down 6, so that's going to look something like that. F will not, F lands right on the line right here. So just A and E. Okay, the bonus, if you access the symmetry of x equals 4, your negative b over 2a, that has to equal 4. So if you let b equal 8, so it's going to be a -8 divided by, then a would have to be a negative 1. Because 2 times a negative 1, so that would be a negative 8 divided by a negative 2, which would be a 4. So your x is, so there's lots of right answers. You could have several. As long as if you divide negative b over 2a, it gives you a positive 4. So c doesn't really matter. C could be whatever you want. So you could go negative 1x squared plus 8x minus 10. The only thing that matters is your a and b.